dine danser.
Så ska vi bli kaffe? Fine. Nemo båge, nemo båge, fine.
I know you're bad for me, but I can't help but wonder if we could really be happy and good together. 'Cause when you touch me, and I can't refuse, baby, I pray we'll be okay. And you won't go and break my whole heart now. Feels like playing with fire, but I like to burn. If I could, I'd give it so much sooner. That it don't make sense that I give you all away. Tell me what you want, what you want. Like it what you got, what you got. Tell me what you want, what you want. Like it what you got, what you got. 'Cause I can give you what you need. I want your fantasy, I got you. Tell me what you want. Like it what you got. I can't deny it's so cliche. I know your lies and all your ways, but I'll be fine. This price to pay might just kill me, but I love it. Yeah, I love it. But I love it. Yeah, I know you're bad for me, but I can't help but wonder if we could really be happy and good together. 'Cause when you touch me, and I can't refuse, baby, I pray we'll be okay. And you won't go and break my whole heart now. Feels like playing with fire, but I like to burn. If I could, I'd give it so much sooner. But it don't make sense that I give you all of me. Tell me what you want, what you want. Like it what you got, what you got. Tell me what you want, what you want. Like it what you got, what you got. Tell me what you want, what you want. Like it what you got, what you got. Tell me what you want. Like it what you got. I can't deny it's so cliche. I know your lies and all your ways, but I'll be fine. This price to pay might just kill me, but I love it. Yeah, I love it. But I love it. Yeah, I love it. What you want? Like it what you got, what you got. Tell me what you want, what you want. Like it what you got, what you got. 'Cause I can give you what you need. I want your fantasy, I got you. Tell me what you want. Like it what you got.
You're new around here, so I'll go easy on you. Curl it, curl it, curl it.
What is up, beautiful people? Chaos.
future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.
up, night all day is that hey, I woke up cold today. I woke up, night all. I woke up cold today. I woke up, night all day is that hey, you copy? I woke up cold today. I woke up, night all day is that day is that. I woke up cold today. I woke up, night all day is that hey, I woke up cold today. I woke up, night all. Somewhere, somewhere, and left, on the ear high, Satan, ear high, on the somewhere, somewhere, and left, on the ear high, Satan, ear high, on the. I woke up cold today. I woke up pretty. Night all day is that hey, you copy? I woke up cold today. I woke up night all day is that day is that. I woke up cold today. I woke up pretty. Night all day is that hey, I woke up cold today. I woke up night all. Somewhere, somewhere, and left, on the ear high, Satan, ear high, on the somewhere, somewhere, and left, on the ear high, Satan, ear high, on the.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody.
folds of midnight water, side by side, we sons and daughters, we set forth for no king's orders, but we'll sail together. Hold fast, tides are turning, flames roar, fires are burning, we'll all be returning if we sail together.
lies under snow cover. Sail on in my memory. I wave from the shoreline. Ship so grand you could not believe. Disembarking on an avalanche from butterfly wings. So my last chance to fight and dream. When it's gone, wherever you land, sing your song. Take this dance, avalanche. We were star-crossed fantasy that was never gonna hold us, or our future histories, but maybe it was just to mold us. Sail on in my memory, our way from the shoreline. Ship so grand you could not believe. Disembarking on an avalanche from butterfly wings. So my
Back to Series 7, a Chaos tournament that is going to be pretty exciting, I think. With me today, I have Spleen,
How's it going, everyone?
and we got a pretty good tournament, a good turnout today, sitting at about 99 players, and a new set coming out last weekend, I think, or the weekend before. New commanders and cards that might be making an appearance today.
Absolutely, we'll be keeping an eye out for those. And of course, before we get started, we definitely have to give a big thank you to, of course, all the players. There's no tournament without the players, and we're happy we get to put these on for you. The judges and staff who, just behind the scenes, put in a ton of work to make sure everything runs smoothly, to resolve any issues, and they're kind of like the skeleton of this of any tournament organization, where without it everything just collapses, but you can't see it from the outside.
No,
Awesome.
a lot of great people working behind the scenes, judges, our tournament organizers. We got Jacoby running this whole stream, making sure we all look good.
Absolutely. And of course, lastly, our Patreon members and everyone who supports us. They help us be able to continue getting better and better, cover any expenses we have, and we couldn't do it without them either.
We couldn't. And yeah, with a lot of the patrons too, and even some of our own staff are entering in today. Samurai Dancer, who just top 4 the most recent Mox Masters, is, I believe, taking another crack at it today, hoping for a win.
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of players who run from tournament to tournament, and it's always really cool to follow people who either get a lot of really good results, or one of my favorite things to see is people who improve their results tournament after tournament. Like, they realize maybe some mistakes they made, and they're like, I'm gonna do better at the next one, and they just keep on that grind. It's always great to see that sort of dedication.
It really is. And speaking of that dedication, Wounded Satellite again today. I'm going to assume on Kinnan. I've seen this player top 4 practically every tournament he's been a part of, at least for the Mox Masters and Chaos ones. So I'm sure we'll be seeing him make a good run today.
I'm just hoping I don't get called to cast his games, because I think I've cast 3 of them so far, and they've all been games that he should have won and went to a draw for one reason or another. Just some absolutely wild, fantastic games, really interesting games. Mm-hmm. But I suspect that after a few of them, he feels a little bit cheated, and I wouldn't want that to happen again.
No, I think we casted one of those games together, and I think I know one of the ones you're mentioning. But it's worked for him. He's gotten there, even with the draws. Draws can be enough sometimes.
Yeah, that is true. They definitely. There's always a big cluster of people with a certain number of wins, and hey, draws are worth 1 point, and 1 point is worth an infinite amount of tiebreakers. So
yeah,
getting that point where you can always a good thing.
And I believe Vivi Goose, hello to you, joining us for the first time, it looks like. Joe saying hi in the chat. So we got people turning up already as we get started here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned in the intro, as we're just waiting for, I think the players are dispersing to their pods. So we should have one coming up soon. A new set has released since the last tournament. So we got some new cards that we should definitely be keeping an eye out for. Any in particular that you're thinking are going to be making an impact?
For me personally, Agatha's Cauldron, I think, is a card that works very well in certain decks. I think.
Oh, the Sicily player loves Agatha's Cauldron.
Yeah, who would have thought? Who would have seen that one coming? But it's not just Sisay, right? Tyam, I think any deck that's like on the green and black package can make a lot of good use of that too.
Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting card in that it can fill a lot of roles. Obviously, like the color fixing is something, like that's what you're really, really interested for in a deck like Sisay, where trying to consistently generate Wooburg is, annoying. But then when you look at, like, I've seen people do things like trying to use it essentially as like a haste enabler for something like a Hermit Druid, where if you just have the Soul Cauldron, you bin a Hermit Druid, you exile it, put the counter on some creature that is not summoning sick, and then you're off to the races. Or you could obviously, use it as like a pseudo reanimator for anything you're trying to reanimate with an activated ability. By anything you're trying to reanimate with an activated ability, I mostly just mean Razaketh, but
yes,
still. Yeah, it's graveyard hate too. That's why people are playing it, right?
Yeah, I mean it's checks all those boxes, right? Even the +1/+1 counters it puts on things can be relevant. But yeah, I kind of see it when I think this card, a pseudo reanimator, it kind of gets around trying to cast a reanimate spell because it's harder to counter on the stack. There's less things that can do it. And then if it's on the field, you get your Razaketh in the bin, you can exile it, and you already have a creature on the board most likely to go to town with it.
And I think it falls in that good sort of gray area where it has a little bit of plausible deniability. Like if someone drops an Agatha's Soul Cauldron on like turn 3 or whatever, obviously you can never let something like an Entomb resolve, but like you don't necessarily think, oh, I have to be really worried about them putting Razaketh in the bin and just winning. So you can sort of get it under people and then later look for some way to discard a card in a more innocuous way or get wheeled or any of that. That people tend to sort of once it's in play for a couple of turns, people tend to, it's like, okay, I guess it's not doing anything, I can relax a little bit, and that's when you sneak something into the bin and you get them. Yeah,
you catch them off guard, you do a little sneaky attack on them, they don't see it coming.
Yeah, so Yordle in chat also saying, yeah, Kinnan, we were talking about Wounded Saddler on Kinnan. I'm imagining that Kinnan absolutely loves Soul Cauldron because it's another way of turning your infinite mana into infinite Kinnan activations.
True.
Because that deck has a lot of artifact tutors and always needs a way to use the infinite colorless mana it is so fond of producing.
I know Wounded Satellite specifically was on that creature, the Phyrexian, where you can tap it to exile a card from a graveyard. I'd be curious to see if that ends up taking the spot of that.
Oh, the mana dork that puts counters on itself? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I can't think of the name, but I know that's what he was trying to make work.
I mean, I think that deck just wants like as many, cheap mana sources as possible. But I guess the Grave Hate was also a sort of, synergy piece.
Scrap Gorger says D-Mage, and then sounds like Wounded isn't high on that one, but see, I'm sure other players are too, which will be exciting.
Yeah, for sure. There are some other cards in the set though that we should probably mention. I'm a little surprised people in chat aren't yelling at us for spending 5 minutes on Soul Cauldron when we haven't got to any of these other ones. Beseech the Mirror is a very spicy card. Generally, there are some really, really broken 4-drops in this format. And this is whatever your best 4-drop is, just from the deck, cast for free. For 4 mana, so it's that backup copy. Obviously, you do have to sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token, but as requirements go, that's pretty down there in terms of how easy it is to fulfill. I know Crick players were absolutely loving this one when they saw it, because obviously the triple black isn't such a concern when you can just pay life. What other decks do you think? Do you think we're going to see this in other decks, or do you think it's mostly just a Crick thing? And do you think any high color decks are going to run it, or is the triple black just too much of an ask?
I think high color, for that reason you mentioned, it's too much of an ask. But once you get to like the 2 or maybe even 3 color decks, you may see some people try to slot it in. I think Rakdos specifically could do a lot with this card. They have a lot of artifacts that they can play with. Prosper comes to mind right away as a deck that would just love this card. But basically, having a black tutor that basically puts something right onto the stack, like a dockside even, can't be overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. And also just sort of the ambiguity of what it's going to be is potentially an advantage. People in chat are mentioning some decks that they think it'll be good in. Yeah, Dehada obviously makes up to 4 treasures when you activate her, so that solves your black problem. I mean, we've seen lots of decks play Necropotence, right? So, obviously this is not exactly the same, but any deck that was ever looking to support Necropotence probably can support this. And black tends to be a color that you want a lot of. It's not like if it was triple white, I think it would be a lot harder to fit in something like a Mardu deck, where typically they're pretty light on the white pips, but...
you can get this just with a Dark Ritual, basically. Dark Ritual, a little extra mana could get you going pretty early. Yeah,
just cheat out. I mean, we've seen a lot of the One Ring. Potentially people could, you could just put Necropotence into play. Lots of different stuff you could cast, like your Wheels, or get a Breach or Dockside, all of that. So, it'll be interesting to see how much of a splash that makes.
And even just being able to put it into your hand in some circumstances, if you don't have the thing to sacrifice, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, for sure. 4-mana tutors aren't something you're happy about playing, but there's definitely a lot of times in a game where you just want to draw gas, and if you're you have a lot of mana, you don't have a lot of cards, you're just I want to draw some action, and you know what, the 4-mana tutor is absolutely action, even if it's a little slow.
It's definitely going to take the place of Grim Tutor in the decks that I run Grim Tutor. I think this just makes sense to run over it.
Yeah, that definitely that makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously, Grim Tutor is not the easiest. It's not exactly like a fast card, so I feel like you're not losing too much by adding this.
But I think there is.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think there is one more deck that we can talk about that may like to use this card, 1 or 2 even. Some new commanders from this set that have gotten a little bit of hype around them, one more than the other. Talion and Rowan, I believe those are how you say those names.
You know what? I'm not going to fight you on it. I thought you were going to say Hilda. No. Yeah, I've definitely seen Talion doing some work. I think I've only seen it in the command zone once, but I've seen it even in the 99 of actually a Sisay list, where it just comes out. I think a lot of these sort of situational draw effects, things like Rhystic Study, can be a problem, people tend to not play into maybe Rhystic Study is a bad example, but Mystic Remora, people will hold stuff until the Mystic Remora goes away or whatever. And with Crom, sometimes people will avoid casting the second spell to not give you free draws, but with Talion, it's never going away, and if you ever cast the spell, you're giving them the draw. So I think people just tend to play into it, sort of act as if it's not there if they can, unless there's a really low cost way of avoiding it. So it tends to just be a static effect that draws cards and doesn't hugely affect people's behaviors to try and avoid having you draw cards.
Yeah, and I think one thing to look at too is it's just a good Dimir commander, right? Dimir are great colors, and I would say up until this point, they've had some interesting commanders, but this is the one that lets you really just play good stuff, Dimir.deck, right? With just some card advantage in the command zone, which draws a surprising number of cards if you name the right number depending on the pod. Just gain that advantage to draw counter magic or Adnos or even just Thassa's Oracle plus consultation.
I have seen it also be a thorn for people who resolved Adnoses.
Yes.
And we're trying to figure out how exactly they can get to going off. You're just like, okay, I'll finish my Adnos at 6 life, and then like, oh, my Dockside dings me, my like removal spell dings me, this tutor dings me. It can be a little dangerous. One thing I am concerned about with it, particularly in Dimir decks, which tend to be sort of all in on Thoracle, is the risk of people just casting spells and forcing you to draw with your Thoracle trigger on the stack, especially because you don't have any of the white like silence type effects to prevent that.
Yes.
I have seen people just throw Labman in there. That is often a solution to that problem, but obviously, you know, it's a little more obvious when you have to put the Labman in play and then find some way to draw a card as opposed to just Oracle Consult, you're dead. But I'm sure we'll see lots of, you know, I'm sure people have found ways of at least mitigating that that still make it on the whole worth it to run Talion.
I think it can be a risk, but in most cases, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get the rug pulled out from under you. Joe, the rounds haven't started yet. Players are just getting situated in their pods, and we're going to be starting the games soon.
Yeah. Which I guess gives us just enough time to quickly talk about Rowan.
One thing real quick before we move on.
Oh, sure.
The Mage talking about Blood Chief Ascension. Yeah, that is a crazy card with talent, for sure. I've seen that card put in some work. It's scary.
I feel, yeah, that's definitely a card that every time it turns on, the whole game becomes really, really different. But yeah, we'll quickly Rowan can discount your red and black spells by a crazy amount, which is obviously very strong. I'm not sure it solves the problems that those Rakdos type decks have had. Like, generally they have a lot of mana and it's sort of the stuff to do with it that's their problem. So this is sort of an interesting take on it, but I'm not sure it's a fundamental fix.
Yeah, I think it's cute. I think it's something you could do in Rakdos, but I think between things like Prosper and the most recent Op Nixilis, there's just a lot of better commanders you can be running, but it has its niche. It's a commander that you can build around, and there are players that enjoy doing that, right? Taking something unique and finding those weird cards that work in that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we get into this pod and the players are doing their mulligans, I guess one thing I saw someone say in chat that didn't come up when I searched cards from Wilds of Eldraine is Elevir of the Wild Court. New Wake Up Babe, new Sisay Stacks commander just dropped.
Ooh.
She's probably the closest thing we're ever going to get to another Winota. It works out a little bit differently in that she just buffs the creatures that you play naturally to be absolutely massive. But that is still, I think that actually can be to her benefit because unlike Winota, where you have to play a bunch of sort of not great cards that you're just running to try and get the Winota triggers, with Elevir, you just play out like normal stacks pieces, and then you drop Elevir, start putting the auras on them. Your board gets absolutely massive really quickly, and then you draw extra cards. So that's definitely an interesting option for stacks. That I think maybe will draw a little less hate than Winota, because I think the way the deck tends to be built, it doesn't suffer as much from having its commander removed, because it's not relying on its commander to get the stacks pieces into play.
Yeah, I think you're right. It can fly under the radar in that way. I think when you are playing green-white, A deck requires a lot of setup, though. It either does nothing or it does everything, in my experience. So curious to see if it makes an appearance here. Getting a big board is not a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we should probably talk about the players who are playing and not
Yeah. So
not the cards we're not seeing.
And talking about cards we're seeing an old, or at least one I haven't seen in a bit, Timna Malcolm, piloted by Noah44. Looks to be a pretty standard blue, white, black mid-range list. You're running your Grand Abolisher, your Lotho, Orcish Bowmaster, just a lot of those kind of mid-range pieces to let you get value with your commanders until you can assemble the Thassa's Oracle combo.
Yeah, this is a deck that we've seen a lot of different builds of, and I've been really interested to see the directions people take it in, because I think there's sort of like I've seen people do like Turbo Naz stuff or stacks or like really mid-rangey stuff, even with turn spells. This list I think is, I mean, it's still on Adnaz. It's not sort of the most mid-range value. But I absolutely love to see it's on both Curse Totem and Grafdigger's Cage.
Mm-hmm.
I think lots of decks, maybe less Curse Totem can be free rolled, but like decks, especially outside of red and green, that are, obviously green has its creature tutors that it doesn't want to shut off, and red has breach combos. But even Staxy decks in red that don't run breach, I feel like often we don't see Grafdigger's Cage when it's like pretty free to run, and obviously like a very strong effect against a lot of decks.
Yeah, even running the Karn, which having that stacks effect that only affects your opponents, shutting down their artifacts can do crazy things for you. Even just being able to exile them off the board. But we're starting off right away, and this is not something I was expecting to see. The turn 1 Demonic Consultation coming out of the Timna Malcolm player.
So this is it's a shame we didn't see a Jeweled Lotus named, because that would have pretty instantly that was the 7th card. Okay, that wasn't too bad at all.
It really wasn't.
This list has Thassa's Oracle, Laboratory Maniac, Praetor's Grasp, and Mnemonic Betrayal, so I'm imagining that Noah felt pretty comfortable. Obviously there's still a risk that you run over all your win cons, but when you have like potentially 4 fully independent paths of finding a win, usually you're pretty safe.
Yeah. I do also just want to move on to the Zasika deck. This is a very interesting deck. It's basically chocked full of these high value legendary permanents. You have Gorn, you have Joda, you have the Peregrine Daimyo, you have Winota, Savala. Just being able to play all these pieces that you can then turn into mana sources to play other high value legendary spells.
Yeah, it's a really interesting build of this. Like, I've seen more Staxy builds that try and prim some of the cheap creatures and have the Prismatic Bridge just dump stuff onto the field once you sort of stacks out with other things. But this is a very new take for me. There's lots of really interesting stuff. So I hope we get to see some of this stuff maybe play out. Or see sort of the ideas behind it, because there's some real cool stuff. Though a lot of it, I have to confess, does leave me wondering if perhaps either the Joda or Sisei Weatherlight Captain that are in the 99 would be better served in the command zone with Essica as an option to find to enable your mana. But we shall see.
Yeah, I had the same thought. Joda is high value, that Cascade can be really so strong, but mana is always good, especially when you're running 4 or 5 drops in abundance. But looking at the Timna Kodama, we got a stack here. Kodama is a great piece to help break parity. Being able to put things on the board under rule of law effects can be good. I know it's also running like the Viscera Seer and the Protean Hulk.
Yeah, this is a deck that gets really interesting just because there's so, like, it gets really tricky as you get to sort of the later game, where once Kodama comes down and there's some stacks out, like, any spell is potentially not what it seems, right? Like, someone, they cast like some, they cast Grim Hireling or something like that, and then you're like, oh, well, that's kind of scary, but, like, not, I don't need to, like, counter that. And then they go, cool, trigger, I'll put in this this Academy Rector, and I'll sacrifice it. Or, I'll put in this Pattern of Rebirth, like, I'll get my Protean Hulk. So it's just it's a very sort of dangerous situation you can find yourself in, where just not knowing what can be put into play for free at any time. And as you said, yeah, it does a fantastic job of just breaking parity on the rule of law, because effectively you get to cast 2 spells every turn by casting one and then putting something in off your Kodama trigger.
Speaking of not knowing what you could have, though, we see the Timna Kodama player have 3 mana, opting to just pass the turn, though. Oh, the Aven Mind Sensor is actually what they had. I was wondering if that was the Oppo, but the Aven, in response to the Blue Farm player's fetch, can keep him off tempo a bit, but the Blue Farm player had a pretty explosive turn 1 with a land, Soul Ring into a Jeweled Lotus. Blue Farm, not a lot to talk about, but the pilot is Ganesh has had some success in these events, having some pretty good placements.
Yeah, this is I think this is a pretty sort of average list from what I've seen. They're on the Containment Priest spice. I enjoy that as a little hate bear that you can just sort of splash for free. Not on some of the, like, super heavy stuff. There's no Grim Hireling, but they are on Professional Facebreaker. So I'd say they're pretty middle of the road in terms of how mid range their deck is. Although I will note there is Toxic Deluge, Dam, and Fire Covenant, which is that's a lot of board wipes. Usually you don't see people on all 3 of those. So I guess they're acknowledging that, people are playing a lot of creatures. Creatures are really strong, and you want to be able to kill them. And so they've designed their deck accordingly.
And this might be a pod where that becomes very relevant. Very high creature-focused decks, with Malcolm, Timnas, even a Sika, like, having multiple board wipes might just save you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of these decks handle getting their boards wiped pretty poorly. Especially if you can get it before a lot of the really big stuff starts coming out of decks like Tuna Kodama.
We do see that the Blue Farm player did not find the land in the top 4. They were able to get the Crom down. Moving on to the Malcolm Timna's turn, a really good start for them. The turn 2 Ristic gets so much value, followed by the turn 3 Malcolm, with no flying blockers except the Mind Sensor and Crom on board. You have the Asika you can still swing into, at least for now.
Yeah, I think yeah, this is pretty much exactly where you want to be. You have the mana open, you're starting to get your own independent value engines online, and you just have this Ristic study. So if anyone's doing anything too crazy, you're probably feeling pretty good. That's probably not what you want to see, though.
When you can't keep a good Winota down, may not work as a commander, but in the 99, let's see.
Yeah, we'll get a trigger. Let's take a quick peek at. There aren't actually that many humans in this deck, from what it seems.
Might not matter. Force coming down, countering the Winota.
Noah's having none of that, and frankly, I don't blame him. That's it's just, you can never be sure, and things could just go really badly really quickly if you let Winota land and then any amount of snowballing happen. So I definitely don't blame anyone on that front.
Eternal Sith, thank you for the subscribing with Prime. But yeah, Sika's in a good spot, though. A lot of mana that they can work with, so being able to play those high-value cards. Timna coming down, so again, a flying attacker could start to see some value even this turn.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think first of all, I don't think the Malcolm's coming at you necessarily, and second of all, you're definitely not blocking it with your mind sensor. So, yeah, get that card draw. Love to see the responsibility, paying for Rhystic Study. I think often with the turn 2 Rhystic Study, everyone feels a little bit like, okay, I have to feed it for that first turn, because I can't afford to slow down that much. But as the game sort of starts to shape itself into a little bit more of a mid game, I think we'll start to see people looking for ways they can play that pay for the study, because it turns out when you give people 10 cards, they tend to kill you.
Yeah. And I think everyone's been pretty responsible. I know they've drawn 1 card at least, but I think Asika's been playing pretty responsibly, paying for those. Professional Facebreaker coming down, though, for Blue Farm. So starting to get mana.
So this is an interesting one, because I notice they don't currently have a black producing land, so they may be slightly reliant on these treasures if they're looking to either cast Tymna or any of the other very important and powerful black spells that Tymna Crom decks tend to run.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting choice to not pay for the Rhystic Study there. Choosing to hold up 2 mana is, like often you want to be holding up 1 mana just because, lots of counter spells cost 1 mana. But 2 mana, there's a lot fewer things you could be trying to represent. It is possible they just wanted to keep the 1 mana open to protect the Crom from something. But I also, I have to wonder if they have one of the few 2 mana, or, the smaller number of 2 mana instant or flash cards that deck tends to run.
Possibly just a couple of 1-drops. Maybe they are representing both the counterspell and like the Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, or potentially like a counterspell and a Vampiric Tutor or something like that. Lots of things it could be. Just a little interesting to note when people elect to hold open mana rather than pay for Rhystic Study.
Speaking of paying for things, not only is there a Rhystic Study, but now a Mystic Remora coming down.
That one's a lot harder to pay for a lot of the time.
It is.
And there's enough mana that I think this is... If you're... particularly, I think if you're Tymna Crom here, you're really unhappy about this, because the other decks are generally much more creature-focused. They don't have to pay for that one. So they can, they do still have to worry about the Rhystic Study, but they can develop much less hindered. And it's not going away anytime soon. There's a lot of mana. Noah's banking the treasures off Malcolm. So it just puts you in a really awkward spot as the Tymna Crom player, because you may just have to try and force through Rhystic and Mystic into this pretty interactive deck.
And you're exactly where you want to be as an Esper player, right? You have mana generation and card advantage on field. And not only that, you're holding up 5 mana for what might possibly be an instant speed, end of turn Adnos.
We're paying retail for Force of Will. All right, we saw the desperation crack into Aven Mind Sensor, and it got there. Found a Badlands, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
They had extra green already from the dorks, so Badlands gives them a decent amount of flexibility. There are a few things that they're still going to have problems with, both in the double white and white blue sort of arenas, because this deck has a lot of very mid-rangey pieces that this mana still doesn't really cast, but hopefully this will let them get at least 1 more legendary creature down, and then when they have 2 mana from 2 legendary creatures with Asika, they should be able to cast sort of the rest of it.
For sure. And it does look like this is going to be more of a grindy game right now, so being able to sit back, get some mana, and then cast these big things, they might just develop a very scary board that no one will be able to answer in the long game.
Yes, although having that Winota removed or countered really does... it wouldn't shock me if the hand was maybe not reliant on that, but, hoping to get the value there, and that could certainly put a damper on that plan.
Speaking of damper,
this is a Jet Mirror.
It is a Jet Mirror, yeah.
Right.
Jetmir, that's kind of sad right now. Not a lot of creatures just yet.
Yeah, but it still gives the whole board vigilance and +1/+0 for now, while still producing mana. So we could definitely see this this going places. One thing we didn't mention that's sort of I think a very interesting choice is this Alchemist's Refuge that's in play. I think we're kind of seeing Disqui get punished for it a little bit. Obviously, they've had what appear to be some mana color troubles, and running a colorless land is definitely doesn't help that in a 5-color deck, particularly one. This is a very pip intensive deck, but I do see the idea of like if the games get sort of stacksy or mid-rangey, particularly though this deck doesn't appear to be running much by way of like rule of law type effects. Other people might be, and there's a decent number of untap effects. So being able to flash your creatures in on other people's turns could potentially just let you sort of develop much more quickly. Like just keep throwing out your big haymakers, even through stacks that might make it hard to dump a lot of stuff in one turn.
Yeah, and I think with Alchemist Retrieval, the dream is, right, get Seedborn Muse down with it, and then you can represent a legendary creature each turn. But even being able to play a Hate Bear piece, yeah, there's not a ton of them, but being able to flash one of those in at the right time can be scary still. So I like it in theory, but when you're running 5 colors, colorless lands, even when your commander generates you mana, can be bad in most cases.
Yeah, it can be could definitely be a bit of a liability, especially with like there's a lot of pressure on lands in this deck. There's a Volrat Stronghold, which is another colorless land. Plaza of Heroes can definitely be awkward, and then Boseiju, Otawara, Cradle as monocolor lands, and Cavern of Souls can also be a little tricky sometimes. So yeah, it's interesting to see. Presumably, they think the risk of mana troubles is worth it, but and all things considered, they did cast a scary 4-drop on turn 3 and a scary 4-drop on turn 4, so seem to be managing it all right.
And I do want to highlight too just the amount of card draw we're seeing that these pieces are able to get. Tymna drew 2 cards from their attack, and the Tymna Malcolm player just drew 2 cards as well from the Demonic Tutor that was cast by the Tymna Kodama player. So we'll see if they decide to represent anything here. What they 2 for 2 mana, Dranith? No, Grand Abolisher, okay.
Well, I guess the implication here is I would assume this means they're setting up to try and go for a win next turn. Though that feels like feeding 3 cards to put a Grand Abolisher into play is a very loud and clear symbol. So we'll see if the other players in the pod both pick up on that signal, and I mean, it is possible they just don't have anything to say about the Abolisher. That does happen sometimes.
It does.
But
and what can be tricky about representing a Grand Abolisher is that even if you're not trying to win just yet, you are thinking that the other players are thinking that you might. So they have to start focusing on that, which could take away focus from another player who's about to go off.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think what you wouldn't want to see here is like, someone using the removal early and then leaving an opportunity for something else to sort of spiral out of control. Especially if you're not actually representing the win. Like, maybe it's worth it if you think you can win here. But like, if you don't have the win, sometimes you just paint a target and people answer something that doesn't actually need to be answered, rather than something that does need to be answered in the immediate.
We do see the Tymna Crom player able to hit their land drop after drawing just a ton of cards off of their combat with Tymna. 2 cards. They drew a couple off of Crom in that last rotation as well. We do see a Vampiric Tutor, though, coming down.
Again, into the Aven Mind Sensors. So this is... maybe this is desperation, trying to find an answer for this Grand Abolisher. Or it is possible they forgot about the Aven Mind Sensor. It is sort of stacked in the middle there. CDH boards, there's a lot going on them, and it's very easy to forget, about like that stacks piece that was played several turns ago and hasn't been doing much, but
but you've drawn
was intentional.
You've drawn so many cards, and I think, it is intentional. I think just being able to look at the top 4 to see if you can find something in there to kind of set up your next draw is worth it.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I also think they kind of need to find something to do. I don't know exactly what it is going to look like, but Noah's down to 17 life, staring down this Jet Mirror, some chip damage from the Timna Kodama deck, and looks like the Crom is going at them too. So, I mean, obviously, when you start with this Mana Crypt and card draw engines, one of the things people can do that doesn't draw you cards but does help deal with you is just keep hitting you. Because Noah could be dead. Probably not this turn cycle, but certainly next turn cycle, if he doesn't have something proactive to do or some way to stem the bleeding on this damage.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier just the importance of board wipes. Blue Farm, in this case, Ganesh being on 3 of them. Timna Malcolm not really being on any except Cyclonic Rift, so no hope of a Toxic Deluge being able to save the day here. Really just looking for the Rift or Bust, I think. Unless it's just a straight up win.
Yeah, that would be my assumption given how many cards they've drawn. Though, a Cyclonic Rift on this board would certainly be very interesting depending on when you timed it, because potentially you could time it so that at the very least Ganesh is actually kind of interested in having it resolve. I think they can rebuild relatively quickly with with the Soul Ring into like Facebreaker Timna. Maybe the Crom doesn't come back down immediately, but that's probably okay. But because I think otherwise it's going to be a pretty uphill battle to try and resolve a Cyclonic Rift. But we shall see.
Not a ton of blue at the table though, right? Like, you have Blue Farm, and yes, Asika is 5 color, but I don't think Asika is... It has some interaction, but it's not like swimming with it, right? It doesn't have any free interaction outside of the Fierce Guardianship. No Force of Will, Force of Negation, or even Pact of Negation. And they're
for sure. I was more talking about Ganesh, who has what looks to be 4 blue mana open and more or less a full grip of cards.
Grafdigger's Cage Show is not a bad card here. Could do something.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely could be. It's something that probably stops Timna Crom from just killing the table here. They typically, their combos are all hit by Grafdigger's Cage. So, I guess that at least buys them time, because probably removing it will take at least another turn.
Can also hurt the Timna Kodama a bit too, depending what line they try to go for.
Yeah, that's I think that's the goal of this here. The Essica does have some stuff that it hits, but not nearly as much from what it seems.
And what's good about the Vigilance from this Jet Mirror is that you can now swing with your creatures, the legendary ones, and still be able to use them for mana production.
Yeah. Obviously, currently, like, Essica has Vigilance naturally, but the Jet Mirror, obviously being able to swing and tap for mana, and then it'll definitely start to snowball as Disqui gets more legends into play. Currently working with, what is this, 8 mana? So if they can play 2 more, then next turn that's, maybe they can play 1 pre-combat off the lands, swing with the second level of Jet Mirror's buff, and then play another one post-combat, and just snowball.
So, what'll be interesting though is you mentioned earlier Noah being at such a low life total, especially compared to the other players. if Noah does die to combat, that does free up to Ganesh to maybe try to present a win with those draw engines being gone. You lose probably one of your most interactive blue decks at the table. There are no real stacks effects on the field except on the Timna Malcolm's board.
Well, other than the Mind Sensor does make it a little tricky. But yeah, I think this is one of sort of the maybe issues is too strong a word, but one of the risks I think I see with playing decks like this Essica deck is just it can often feel like you're kind of reliant on other players to actually stop people from winning because it's so focused on dumping out its really strong and scary creatures. And then, yeah, you can get to that point where if the most controlling player is the one in the strongest position and you have to kill them, you can be freeing up a lot of other players. And you know, that can go poorly. Another thing Discrete has to be really, really mindful of is if they hit Noah down to the range where Ari can kill them, then the Grafdigger's Cage goes away and there's a Grand Abolisher. And that is a fantastic recipe for this Hulk deck to just kill you.
Yeah, it really is. We do see the Linvala coming down too, which is an interesting piece. Not only does it hurt the Timna Kodama player a bit, but it also stops the Professional Facebreaker, which might be some of the card advantage the Timna Crom player was hoping for when going off.
Yeah, although I think Ganesh is probably, with both Timna and Crom on the field, is probably in a position where they're perfectly happy just drawing the cards off their commanders and using this Facebreaker to make 2 or 3 treasures a turn. More so than needing to crack the treasures for value.
So we
Swords and something in the end step.
The Linvala? Paying for
no, it looks like it's so I think this is
the Grand Abolisher.
Kind of an example of what we were talking about earlier, where people just feel the need to remove Grand Abolisher, even in places where you can't win, because like there is practically no chance that Ari could win here through Grafdigger's Cage and Linvala. But so now this Swords has been used to sort of prevent being unable to interact with a win attempt that, in my view, just sort of isn't really forthcoming at this time. And perhaps it might have been better served either clearing out a blocker to finally finish off Noah, or stopping Disqui from snowballing, probably by removing the Jet Mirror. But now, you know, I do understand being in that position of like, if I have removal for this Grand Abolisher, I don't spend it, and then we die to the Grand Abolisher, then, you know, then I feel like an idiot, and so I want to avoid that possibility, and so I'm just going to remove it. Is a take to which I'm definitely sympathetic.
Seeing the win attempt here, we are seeing, I believe that's a Collector Oof though, which really hurts the Timna Malcolm and Timna Crom player.
Yeah, that'll definitely slow them down, and probably makes Disqui feel a lot better about trying to kill
Just down in response.
Is this in response or is this end step?
I think it's in response because they had to crack the treasures, yeah, because they had to use the floating mana. This might just be for the card draw, but it's also drawing the Timna Malcolm player a lot of cards.
Yeah, this is a very strange choice, I would say. And we're seeing Jet Mirror. Was Eska already tapped? I think Eska was already tapped. We're now seeing Jet Mirror tapped for mana.
Yeah, for blue, I think they said.
That's a very odd choice.
It is, because that turns off, like, you use your treasures for that, but if you just stress down, then you can turn off the oof and still have your treasures.
Well, and maybe they felt they were just so limited on mana. But yeah, it is a sort of a strange timing here.
Yeah. Well, you had like 3 treasures that you just use your mana, your lands, and you have your access to your soul ring, all your treasures from before, plus some more treasures you make off the professional brace breaker here.
Sure, but like if it gets interacted with, you might feel, or like you might be worried if you go to your turn, you try and dress down. That feels like a. Oh, we lost camera. Hopefully, this is just a minor technical glitch.
Mm-hmm. You got a fan in the chat, Spleen. David L. Breyer, excited to see you.
Yep, I'm back. I was away for the last couple, but yeah, it's good to be back.
All right, we do see Ganesh come back pretty quickly, so see what happens here. While we're getting strained out, I would like to take this time to shout out our partner content creators who have been doing a lot of great work with us, make some amazing content. Asylum Gaming, also known as Kin and Cam, Fervent Alchemist Kai, One Mana Floating, or Josh O, who I believe is competing today, Veladef MTG, MTG Basics MA6. Just a lot of talented people who put out a wide range of content, especially gameplay videos, but deck techs, and just some opinion pieces on CDH as a whole. Really recommend you check out those people.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to have. It's really nice to have people who make content about these tournaments and talk about it. And we love providing them with a source for content. And basically everybody wins.
Yes.
So we're seeing Ganesh go to combat here. Looking, I think this is an attempt at drawing 3 cards. Although
I think
I'm not exactly sure what's going. I think I would assume it's Timna at Noah, Crom at Disqui, and Facebreaker at Ari. Because I think if you send the Facebreaker at Disqui, they happily trade the Dork for it. It looks like this will be 3 cards, 3 treasures, and that's pretty good.
Pretty good, but again, Collector Oof and Linvala turning off a lot of their utility for you, but cards are good still, for sure.
Yep.
Hitting that 4th land drop, which is nice.
Yeah, especially under the Collector Roof. Hitting land drops very important. I think that's something that a lot of CDH decks maybe haven't put as much thought or emphasis on recently, but when things start to go wrong, you want to be hitting your land drops.
Mm-hmm. Collector Roof not as prevalent as it was a few months ago, though, but still might get you from time to time, like here. It's really going to get this Timna Malcolm player, though. They have only 2 lands and a low life total and a fish they have to pay for on their upkeep.
Yeah, I have to assume we're going to see this fish be let go.
Yeah.
I don't think it can be supported. Like tapping out here to pay for this fish just feels like you're sealing your own death, signing your own death warrant.
I agree. But it does again give Ganesh some more freedom if they try to present a win, because now there's one.
No. Uh-oh. Okay, I think they've caught this. They're paying?
Or are they trying to do something in response?
Maybe this could be something like a Tainted Pact. Just doing it with the fish around the stack, so if people interact, you do get the card draw.
Mm-hmm. Though that does tap down both of your lands, so even if you hit a land drop, what are you getting there? Hoping for a Swords maybe, so that you can deal with the Collector Oof that way, have all your mana?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely a thick board right now with all these creatures. Nope, it's a dress down.
Another dress down.
See, this is where I thought the dress down would be more useful before.
Yeah, this is...
Everyone's passing on this. So this notably does also turn on Ganesh's board, and they have a lot of mana, so maybe they have a Nos that they could try to do over this or something like that. Even overload like a Rift, who knows?
Yeah, there's all of a sudden there's a lot of mana. Okay, was this upkeep and Noah just didn't untap the Malcolm, or was this end step? Looks like it was upkeep because the lands are staying tapped.
Yes, I believe this was upkeep in response to everything. They might just
okay, so the Malcolm just should be untapped. Not that I guess it matters because it's probably going to have to block something.
Yeah, I think you either win here or who knows. It's going to be very bad for you. So people talking about there now being a dress down on the field and what that kind of means for them.
Yeah, this is a bit of an awkward one because I don't know how well this deck is set up to win through its own dress down. Obviously, sometimes you want to cast something like a dress down, you do your Nas, and then you can just remove your own dress down, or you can remove the problem pieces or whatever. But here, it all has to happen all at once, and most of this deck's wins are dependent on creatures, and the ones that aren't, which typically involve cards from other people's decks, are not super easy to set up in a game state like this.
Notably, the Mnemonic Betrayal, which is a piece that may have been able to get around something, has been exiled from that initial demonic consultation.
Yeah, and trying to Praetor's Grasp something like a Breach combo isn't going to work because of your own Grafdigger's Cage. They
do get the tutor though. The Aven Mind Center is turned off right now.
Yep. Is this? I'm wondering, is this going to be a quasi desperation tutor? Potentially something like looks like they're not playing Gilded Drake. I was thinking, could they be Gilded Draking the Jet Mirror? So I suppose they could Phantasmal Image the Jet Mirror, or something like that, just to try and. I guess they don't even have 3 creatures. I was thinking potentially. Oh, actually, also Phantasmal Image doesn't work under Dress Down. Potentially, some way of trying to. If the Malcolm is big enough that it can kill something swinging at you, then potentially you can discourage, Linvala, Crom, Jetmir, these sorts of things from swinging. But it doesn't look like that's really going to be an option either.
Yeah, outside of the Rift, which would only be a baby Rift at this point, I don't see anything that could really save them or get them out from under this.
I'm wondering, is the best they can do an Orcish Bowmaster?
That actually wouldn't be the worst thing.
It does create the blocker. You get the triggers off Ari's Timna to try and deal with something potentially off Ganesh's board. It could make the difference. I mean, currently there's 4 creatures, so it's not going to make a difference on the Jetmir level unless Disqui is dumping out 2 creatures pre-combat, in which case pinging off that Elvish Mystic actually would make a big difference. But because 2 mana is not a lot. Though the problem here is that they tapped, they left themselves with just the Petal. Which means that they kind of have to do it before they can't hold the Bowmaster because they won't have mana to cast it, because once this Dress Down goes away, the Collector Roof comes back online.
Exactly. So you don't get the ETB trigger and you don't get the army immediately. You have to wait for that card draw to kind of trigger that, which may not come before you're dead.
So Noah could pass to their own end step, crack the Petal with the Dress Down sacrifice trigger on the stack, and then cast a Bowmasters after the Dress Down is gone. But you lose the sort of element of surprise. You probably would have wanted to be able to put in a blocker at instant speed for, say, Jetmir coming at you. But if you do it at sorcery speed, then, or I guess it's not sorcery speed, but if you do it on your turn, then Disqui knows what you have when they're assigning their attackers. Though, I would be a little concerned as Disqui about killing Noah here. So I'll be interested to see if Discree maybe wants to switch targets, force Ari and Ganesh to put in a little more effort to deal with Noah. Maybe start softening up Ganesh, who, has had a lot of cards and potentially a lot of mana, and is in a very strong position if Noah's interaction and Rhystic Study go away.
Yeah, it could. Though, looking at what was put in hand, I can't be certain, but it almost looked like a Dark Ritual that was selected. So
They already have the Orcish Bowmaster?
Maybe. I think they were saying they were like one short, so I don't know what they're really thinking here, but they are trying to make a deal right now. They are trying to say that they won't... Ganesh is trying to make a deal like, I won't attack into you. So a lot of politicking right now.
Yeah, it's definitely... if you're Noah, you're incentivized to come up with like sort of any deal you can. Maybe you can leverage this tutor with another player in the pod. Like, hey, if I get an answer for like this stacks piece you don't like, will you not kill me? So it is the Bowmaster. Oh, we're just using floating mana for it. Okay. So no ETB, or it is a Bowmaster. It didn't look like that's what was tutored for. We did sort of see a very quick flash of it. But,
yeah. I just had it in hand already too.
Possibly.
Splocketeer, thank you for subscribing. Sam Sapper, congrats on your win. Wounded, yep, that's right. We have 90-minute rounds. Oh, that's a Doomsday.
Doomsday being discarded, so not the most threatening.
Yeah. I was looking at chat, I looked over, I saw Doomsday, I was like, what's happening here?
All right.
Yeah,
so I think this is a really sort of interesting crux point for Disqui, in terms of who they want to be attacking now.
Another thing to kind of make note of too, Squee doesn't have the card advantage that these other players have, and now they only have 3 cards in hand, so they might start to peter out sooner rather than later and not be able to keep up with the development that other players are going to have.
Yeah, that's definitely a big risk of these sort of mid-rangey snowball type decks, which is one of the reasons I was sort of wondering, would either like Joda or Sisay, obviously they solve a different problem. Like Essica gives you the mana to cast these high pip legendaries more easily, but yeah, it feels like without a lot of stacks and without a lot of interaction, you can definitely run into...
It's a 1/4 legendary creature god that has vigilance that you can tap for a mana of any color, and it also gives your other legendary creatures vigilant and add 1 mana of any color when you tap it. On the backside, which in a deck like this might actually be more relevant than in some, it's Wooburg mana for an enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. You put it onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, so that might be relevant for a deck like this. I'm curious to see how often they choose to play that side, but if Esika does die, it could come back like that.
Yeah, that is true. It's a slow value engine, and in a deck like this that's running things like Mana Dorks, it's a very inconsistent one. But you can hit that point where you just don't need more mana, and you do need whatever value you can get. Similar to how lots of decks run Burgi as like a mana storm engine, and then sometimes you just have a ton of mana, and you're like, oh yeah, right, I can play this Harnfell and get some card advantage that way, or at least card. It's not exactly card advantage, but can dig.
Steven on YouTube asking, so we have a Timna Malcolm player in the top left, and in the bottom left we have a Timna Crom player.
And in the bottom right we have a Timna Kodama player.
Yes.
3 Timnas in the command zone of this pod, and I believe 1 Timna in the 99. So everyone in this pod registered a Timna.
We could
Turns out, Timna's a very strong card.
Could be possible to see all 3 Timnas, or all 4 Timnas on the board at once in this game.
I know Timna being strong is a hot take, but
yeah. Timna, good card. Who would have thought? Good colors too. Oh, there's another Silent Flight type effect in the Ranger Captain coming down. Will trigger the Crom. Will trigger the Ristic.
Master.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Ristic first, then Crom, which is not a May. You're forced to draw, which means you get the Orcish Bowmaster trigger, which pings down something.
It's not actually a particularly inviting target here. I mean, you can hit the Mind Sensor, but I'm not sure you want to free up Ganesh's tutors like that.
No.
Also, okay, I guess... I'm not sure how clear it was. I'm assuming Discreet must have gone at Ganesh here, because I noticed all of a sudden Ganesh is at 8. I'm pretty sure they were at, like, 26 last time I checked, so,
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. It looks like Timna and Even Mind Sense are also heading that way, though.
Okay.
Plus,
looks like our sound might be out on Twitch. Hopefully Jacoby can get that resolved. But I guess if we still have YouTube viewers, I'm not sure if they can hear us. Oh, I think we might be back.
BBO1 hoping for the All-Kinnan finals. That would definitely be something.
It would be something. Would it be good is a different question. I always had a running joke about like which mirror matches are the most fun. I'm not sure Kinnan's a particularly fun mirror match.
No. We do see the Containment Priest, I think, being flashed out on the end step, though. Paying for the Ristic.
Yeah, so that is another thing that sort of gives Ganesh license to feel like they can probably kill Noah. Both Containment Priest and Linvala very strong against Timna Kodama, so probably doesn't have to worry about a surprise win on that front.
Yeah, but if you swing out into kill Noah and then you don't win, then you're probably just going to die to the swing back from the other 2 players.
Yeah, for sure. But just like continue to put damage on is probably safer now that another hate piece under your control for the Hulk combo has come out. But yeah, I don't think you want to be tapping out or swinging out and leaving yourself shields down, because there's a lot of damage that could potentially be coming your way.
Speaking of hate pieces, so we just saw the Dam in the Timna Malcolm stand, so they actually are running Dam. I missed that when I was looking at their sorceries before, so they do have the potential to Overlord a board wipe if they hit their land drop.
Yes. Which I'm assuming they will, because they've drawn a lot of cards since they discarded to hand size last turn. So I'm assuming that there's a land drop to find, though this is another interesting question of, if you're someone like Ganesh, do you want a Dam to resolve here? I do like the idea of, if you hit Noah now with Crom, then I think you want the Dam to resolve, because if Noah goes to 4, then you can just go to your turn, replay the Crom, and finish them off. But if you don't get that damage in now, then maybe you can't afford to have your board reset because you're worried about what